had been 2 days since they were locked in the funhouse. Nekomaru had felt bad for Hajime losing and getting stuck sleeping on the couch on that first night, so he offered to take the room on the girls' side. None of them had any complaints. Nekomaru was pretty straight-laced, and they knew he wouldn't do anything to them. Unlike Kazuichi, Sonia made her feelings about him pretty clear. Monokuma had said hunger would be their motivation this time around. No one wanted to admit that it was taking a toll on all of them. Chiaki and Sonia had been that close, taking a bite out of each other, claiming they were both some kind of food. Cakes, fried meats, ripe vegetables, whatever their hunger-addled brains were craving, probably. But Hajime had a bit of a secret. Everyone was starving, that was a fact. Days without food, the only water coming from their bathrooms, and barely a wink of sleep because of their circumstances. And Hajime was fine. Sleep-deprived, make no mistake, but not starving. Monokuma Taichi put a strain on him, but not because of the skipped meals. No, for some reason, it was only his lack of sleep that drained him. The worst part was that he didn't even know why. It wasn't possible for a normal student like him to go a little over 2 days without food and be fine. But he felt normal. It felt normal. Like habit, like routine. He had pondered it over, searching every bit of his fuzzy memory of Hope's Peak Academy before coming here, but no memory came up. All he could do was wallow in his own confusion and lack of sleep in the resting area outside the rooms. He was alone in the quiet, with only the faint ticking of a clock hung on the wall to keep him company. And for possibly an hour, knowing the time was a luxury to Monokuma, apparently, that was it. Then, suddenly, it wasn't. Hinata, Gundam's rough voice, had joined him, resting his back against the wall opposite him. Dark circles under his eyes stood prominent under the shoddy lighting and gaudy fruit markings on the walls. Hey. At first, his voice was raspy, probably due to him remaining silent for at least a couple hours, but Hajime cleared his throat and continued. Can't sleep too? The demon voices called to me in my sleep. Gundam was always a little weird, so Hajime decided not to question his odd response. You, however, seem to have more energy than the others. Hajime couldn't help a small, bitter laugh. He tensed his hands a few times, each grasp weaker than the last. The fact that he was up well after midnight was taking its toll. Sure doesn't feel like it right now. You misunderstand. I do not speak of physical energy. The energy that stays in you is that of the mind. Hajime must have looked confused enough because he continued. While the others' powers remain dull in our situation, mine included, yours is as strong as ever. Ah. Hajime looked down at his feet at his realization, feeling the sudden urge to not look into his classmates' eyes. Someone finally caught on that he wasn't as delirious, or paranoid in Kazuichi's case, as everyone else. I don't really have a reason to tell you if that's what you're looking for. I guess I can just go without food for a little longer than most. I don't even know why. Gundam hummed for a second, then shifted to putting his weight on his other foot and crossing his arms over his chest. Perhaps the remnant of a previous life is strong with one such as yourself. That made him look back up. A previous life? Yes, he nodded once. Nothing truly dies, after all. Not you, not me, not even my dark devas. A hamster showed itself from inside his scarf for a moment, giving a little squeaking greeting before dipping back down into hiding. Another life, huh? With everything going on with all of them, all the murders and executions and talk of traitors. Going back to a previous life sounded good. Maybe one where everyone were just normal students, like they were supposed to be, before coming on this class trip that stupid rabbit and bear set up to go horribly wrong. With Gundam's arms crossed, Hajime finally got a good look at the thin bandages covering most of them. They were alone now, so it was as good a time as any to ask the question that surely all of them were wondering. Can I ask? Gundam nodded. What's up with the bandages? You said you offered up your arms to stop your hamsters from going on a rampage, right? There was no way that was true, but even if it wasn't, Hajime still wanted to know what he would say when asked. I could tell you my grand tale. And Gundam looked away for a moment, deciding. Hajime waited. But since you are being sincere, I suppose I will as well. The moments where Gundam unfurled the end of the bandages on his left arm were slow, almost seeming deliberately drawn out. Then his wrist came into view, followed by the few inches above it, before Gundam stopped and displayed his arm to Hajime. He nearly stopped breathing. Scars, rows and rows of them, lines spreading across his wrist, and more leading above where Hajime could see, some deep and dark, others raised and uneven like they were done while panicked and desperate. They looked angry, despite clearly being long-healed. Some of them were even crossed over onto each other. Those weren't accidents. Hajime looked away. He couldn't help it. Gundam began to wrap his arm back up, and Hajime just stared at the ground. Without thinking, he put his hand on his left arm. He imagined what his own would look like with those marks, or what would make him do that, to hurt himself like that on purpose. I am not the strongest. Gundam finished his task and spoke quietly in the echo of the resting area. I was weak and decided my body needed to be punished for it. I wear these bandages to conceal, for it upsets the people I meet. Quick pause. They stare. They worry. Some insult. A definitely longer pause. Pained and tense, he continued. I do not like their attention. And Hajime understood. He had never experienced the kind of pain someone must have gone through to hurt themselves like that, but he understood. His memory of Hope's Peak Academy was fuzzy at best, but the beginnings of sneers, insults, and teachers scolding him were there, somewhere in the back of his mind. They lingered, mocking him without having to utter a single word. Perhaps that had something to do with the hunger that everyone but him was dealing with. He couldn't remember a big chunk of his past, after all. I'm sorry. It was habit, always apologizing even when none of that was his fault. Gundam didn't remark on his empty, quiet apology. Hajime felt a little worse, knowing all this now. Kazuichi, Hiyoko, and even the mild-mannered Mahiru had all made comments about how weird he was for never showing his arms. He hadn't worn a swimsuit when everyone else went swimming for that little bit of time before Monokuma showed up, and he probably would rather be seen as weird for staying out of the water than be judged for his past. But they didn't know that last part. How Gundam stood their remarks about how weird he was without hiding his true personality was actually honorable. Everyone thought Gundam was a little, if not really, weird, Hajime included, but maybe they had a lot more in common than he thought. You seem ready for rest, Gundam said, breaking their silence. Hajime's eyes were droopy, he noticed, and his muscles were more relaxed than they were when he first tried to convince his body to shut down for the night. I guess I am. Hajime stood up, getting on the same level as Gundam. Thanks for keeping me company. Think nothing of it. He stopped leaning against the wall and gave a small smile. I enjoyed our conversation as well. I trust you will not? He didn't have to continue that sentence for Hajime to understand. This was a private conversation. Neither of them wanted their secrets told. I understand. Likewise. Gundam dipped his head in a small nod, closing his eyes for a brief moment. You can put your faith in me to keep your matters to yourself. With one final wave, Hajime started to walk back to his room, passing by his late-night companion. Good night. Rest easy, mortal. Gundam, too, started making his way back. I bid your dreams remain peaceful, as one such as you deserves. He had a weird way of saying good night and sleep well, but maybe the two of them weren't so different after all.